Welcome back to Bookworm. This book is about a feeling many people struggle to explain because nothing clearly bad happened. You grew up, you adapted, you learned to cope, and yet something still feels missing. Running on empty gives language to that quiet emptiness and emotional distance. If you've ever felt disconnected from your feelings or unsure what you truly need, stay with this video. Like, subscribe, and let's begin.
Today, we're going to talk about something really powerful, something that honestly can shape our entire adult lives, a lot of times without us even knowing it's there. We're diving into the work of Dr. Janice Webb and her book, Running on Empty, to explore this invisible force that can leave us feeling, well, disconnected, even when everything on the outside looks just fine.
So let's start with a question that might feel familiar. Have you ever just looked at your life, your job, your relationships, all the things you've built, and had this quiet, nagging thought in the back of your head, shouldn't I be happier? It's this strange feeling of being on the outside looking in on your own life. You might feel unfulfilled or maybe a little numb, even when you have everything you're supposed to want.
And when we feel that way, what do? We look for a reason, right? We dig through our past, searching for some big, obvious event, some trauma, some big fight, something that would explain it all. But what if we're looking in the wrong place? What if the problem isn't something that happened to you at all? What if the real issue is hidden in what didn't happen?
And here's the thing that's so confusing for so many people. This feeling is incredibly common among really capable, successful adults. People who seem to have it all together. They look back at their childhoods and think, it was good. I had food, a roof over my head, no major trauma. And because there's no obvious cause for this inner emptiness, the blame turns inward. The conclusion becomes, well, there must be something wrong with me.
But that feeling, that emptiness, it's not a personal flaw. According to Dr. Webb's work, it's actually the result of an invisible force. It's about something that was missing, a vital emotional ingredient you didn't even know you were supposed to get. So today we're going to pull back that curtain, we're going to give this force a name, and we're going to understand how it operates. Because naming it, that's the very first step toward taking away its power.
So, what do we call this thing? This invisible force that can leave us feeling like we're running on an empty tank when the whole world sees us as full? Let's give it its proper name.
The term is childhood emotional neglect, or CEN for short. Now, I want you to focus on two words here, enough and emotional. This isn't about parents who are mean or didn't love their kids, not at all. It's about a parent's failure to notice, validate, and respond to their child's feelings, enough. It's a subtle, consistent lack of emotional connection that over years and years leaves a really deep mark. And this is absolutely crucial to understand. CEN is not about what a parent did. That's abuse, acts of commission. Those are visible, memorable events. CEN is the opposite. It's an act of omission. It's what a parent failed to do. It's not one big trauma you can remember. Its power comes from the fact that it's made up of thousands of tiny, invisible, unmemorable moments. It's the sadness that was never soothed, the anger that was never validated, the joy that was never shared. Dr. Webb has this perfect metaphor for it. She says it's the white space in the family picture rather than the picture itself. Think about that. You look at an old photo and you see the people, the smiles, the event. You don't see what's missing. Emotional neglect is that white space. It's the emotional background that was supposed to be filled with connection and understanding, but was just left blank. And here's the real trap. You can't remember something that wasn't there. You just can't. So you grow up with this feeling of emptiness, but no clear reason for it. You can't point to a specific moment and say, that's why I feel this way. All you're left with is the feeling itself, and the conclusion that the problem must be you. You start to think, maybe I was just born this way, a little empty, a little flawed.
So, how does this actually play out in a family? How does a child's emotional tank end up empty, even when the parents are good, loving people?
Well, the key ingredient for filling up that emotional tank is something called emotional attunement. It's really just a parent's ability to tune in to their child's feelings, to see them, get them, and respond in a way that makes the child feel heard. The best way to understand this is to see it in action. So let's use an example from Dr. Webb's book about a kid named Zeke.
So in the story, Zeke gets in trouble for talking back to his teacher. When his mom finds out, she doesn't just jump straight to punishment. First, she connects. She sits down, she listens to his side of it. Then she validates his feelings by actually naming them for him. She says things like, It sounds like you were embarrassed, and I get how frustrated you were. By doing this, she's sending a powerful message. Your feelings are real, they make sense, and I see them. Then, and only then, does she set a boundary about his behavior. In that one chat, Zeke learns his feelings matter. His tank gets filled.
Okay, now, just pause for a second. Imagine that conversation going a totally different way. What if the parent never asked about the feeling behind the behavior?
If Zeke's mom had just said, "We do not talk back to teachers, end of story," and ignored his embarrassment and frustration, Zeke would have learned a very different lesson. He would learn that his actions are all that count, and his inner emotional world, it's irrelevant, or worse, it's a problem. When that happens again and again and again, a child learns to do one thing: push their feelings down. They basically build a wall around their emotions because experience has taught them that feelings are useless.
And it's so important to understand this is rarely, if ever, intentional. Most parents who emotionally neglect their kids do it because that's what they learned. They can't teach their child an emotional language they were never taught themselves. It's like an emotional blind spot. They grew up with it, and without even realizing it, they pass that same blind spot down to their own kids. It's a silent inheritance, passed from one generation to the next, completely invisible to the people carrying it.
So, what happens when a child who grew up with that empty emotional tank becomes an adult? What are the lasting scars of this invisible wound?
Well, the effects are pretty wide-ranging. There's that core feeling of emptiness we talked about. There's something called counterdependence. That fierce inability to ask for help because you learned really early on that you're on your own. There's a real lack of self-compassion. You can be incredibly kind and forgiving to everyone else, but you're just relentlessly hard on yourself. And deep down, there's often this secret nagging feeling that you're somehow fatally flawed, that if people really truly knew you, they'd be disappointed.
In a lot of ways, this numbness can feel even worse than sharp pain. Pain is at least something. You can describe it, people get it. But how do you describe a void? How do you explain the feeling of nothing being there when you know something is supposed to be? It's incredibly isolating. And this is often what drives things like burnout and people-pleasing. You're constantly striving and doing for others, hoping to feel something, but that inner well just stays dry.
There's actually a clinical term for this experience. It's called alexithymia. It sounds complicated, but it literally translates to no words for feelings. And it's the direct result of growing up in a home where emotions just weren't talked about. If nobody ever gave you the vocabulary for your inner world, you grow up unable to read your own signals. You might know you feel bad, but you can't tell if it's sadness or anger or fear. It's all just a jumble of static. And this leads to another huge missing skill: self-soothing. Think about it. When a little kid is upset, a parent's calm voice and comfort teaches them how to handle their own big feelings. They slowly internalize that parent's soothing voice. But if that voice was never there for you, then as an adult, you're kind of left without the tools. When life gets overwhelming, you might not know how to bring yourself back to a place of calm because nobody ever showed you how. And that can really shake your self-trust and your sense of security. Okay, so if any of this is resonating with you, the big question is, now what? Well, the good news is that just understanding this is the most powerful first step you can possibly take toward refueling your own tank.
Let me be really clear about this. The point of learning about emotional neglect is not to blame your parents. Really, most of them were likely doing the very best they could with the emotional tools that they themselves were given. The real goal is to finally understand the true reason for your struggles. It's to shift the explanation from "something is wrong with me" to "I missed out on learning a skill." And that shift, just that awareness, can start to lift a lifetime's worth of self-blame off your shoulders. It brings relief.
This quote from Dr. Webb's book really just says it all. Feelings aren't the problem, they're the fuel. They give our lives meaning and color and direction. And if your tank wasn't filled up when you were a kid, the job of filling it now falls to you. It's a journey of learning how to finally listen to your own feelings, to welcome them in, and to see them not as a burden, but as the life-giving energy they were always meant to be. So I want to leave you with this one last thought to ponder. What if that feeling of emptiness that you may have carried for so long isn't actually a sign that you're broken? What if it's not a flaw at all, but simply a space inside you that is now finally just waiting for you to fill it with your own attention, your own compassion, and your own feelings? What if it's not a void, but a quiet invitation to begin?
Welcome back. If this book resonated, it's likely because you recognized that numbness, not sadness, just absence. Running on empty reminds us that unmet emotional needs don't disappear. They simply go unnamed. Awareness can be deeply relieving. If this video helped you feel understood, please like it, subscribe to Bookworm, and share in the comments what felt familiar. Thank you for being here and taking this time for yourself.